Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Gary McGregor from Sydney in Australia, an experienced transport strategist who was involved in developing key planning documents that shaped the long-term railway strategy for Sydney. In this first part of our three-part conversation, expect to learn the importance of a whole network view for any new investment, how a great strategy can lead to complacency down the line, what led to the creation of an additional railway mode in Sydney, what informed the plan to convert one of the oldest lines in Sydney to a driverless metro service, and much more. Please enjoy and subscribe so that you get notified about all other insightful episodes of this podcast. And you can support the continuation of the show even more by noticing and acting on the following. Hi, this is Doc Frank, and before we get into the podcast, I want to quickly tell you about ONO, O-N-O. In case you don't know what it means, here in Australia it means or nearest offer, and that means that a price for a certain thing is negotiable. So how does it work and how may that be of interest to you? If you're interested in training or education on advanced modern signaling or the capacity increase of railways, then please do step 1 up here and check out my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com. You will find a globally unique collection of training offers that you can't find anywhere else. If you do, let me know. I'm always happy to learn. There are courses about the blueprint for high capacity signaling, the mindset for high capacity railways, and of course the flagship CBTC training that has been the longest running CBTC training in the world, even though it's been regularly updated. If you have found anything that's of interest to you, then we come to step number 2. You look at the regular price. If you think that's fair, that's good, then just procure the training and enjoy. I'm happy with that. If you want to save a few bucks, then send me an email to training@docfrank.com.au. And in that email, let me know which training or conference recording you are interested in and what is the price that you want to pay for it. And if I consider your offer reasonable, if it makes sense for me, I will accept it. Otherwise, I will let you know, and maybe we have a little negotiation along the way as well. And then you have the opportunity to enjoy world-class training on signaling at prices that are below the nominal package. So I think it's a good offer. It won't last forever. The current intent is to keep it running to the end of this calendar year, 2024. So don't wait to the last minute. Check out my training portal. And if you find something, then send me an email and let's negotiate. But now, please enjoy the upcoming podcast episode. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Frank. A long time no see. We've certainly worked together many times over the years, so good to speak to you again.
Yes. I thought of you recently. We had the commissioning, or not we, but Sydney had the commissioning of the city section of Sydney Metro, and in that regard, I saw several posts on LinkedIn relating to Sydney's rail future. So you have been involved in that. Why don't we start with you explaining what Sydney's rail future is and which role you played in it?
All right. Well, I would say that the opening of the metro is a really good time. The opening of the metro through the CBD is quite a good time to reflect on Sydney's rail future.
Yeah.
And I was the project manager for the strategy, working across a number of agencies. And I just want to take a step back to what, I suppose, to the environment we were in at the time of Sydney's rail future. In probably the 2008-9 to 11 period, there were two announcements of new metros in Sydney: the Northwest Metro and then the CBD Metro, and they stirred up quite a bit of controversy in the media. From a range of reasons. There's a lot of excitement about new technology and new service types of Sydney. Also, some concerns from some people interested in transport strategy. There were also concerns from the union movement, who were concerned about driverless trains as well. So it's quite a challenging time, and it would be fair to say that the project initiatives were actually cancelled. And there was a view that transport strategy underpinning projects was not very strong. Now, one of I would say we all know that Rod Staples had a very significant influence, an amazing contribution to the Metro. Another person I want to really draw attention to is Les Wallinger,
Yes.
who was at one stage head of Metro, but head of Transport for New South Wales. He came from a road background, but really just got transport and really was passionate about a strategy for investment. And I was very fortunate that I was working the railways at that time, and he asked me to come and lead the Sydney's Rail Future document preparation. And what he was actually although being a roadsman from background, was quite passionate about the role of mass transit in the future of our cities. And his view is, if you really are going to have great projects, you actually need a strategy, and your strategy must tell the full picture of the network. It can't just talk about an individual project. And even in that sense, Sydney's Rail Future, whilst it was, I suppose, a mode rail, although it talks about a few different areas of rail, what was very important is it then linked into a transport master plan that then tried to do a picture of the entire transport system. And that was something he was passionate about, and the Minister of the Transport at the time, Gladys Berejiklian, was also quite passionate about. So that was the context. Now, coming back to the environment, we have a new government. We've recently had a government that announced and cancelled a Northwest and a CBD Metro. A new government comes in and says, is quite critical of the lack of planning, and says we're going to build a Northwest Rail link as an extension to the existing network. And so, and we're also going to do a transport master planning, and all our decisions will be made in the context of a long-term transport master plan. So my role was to coordinate network strategy and work very closely with Transport, with the Department of Planning, with Sydney Trains, which is important. There was a separation of Sydney Trains, New South Wales Trains, and to get a collaborative view on the future network. And one of the particular things that was very important was that any solution had to tell the story about the whole network, not just about an individual project. I think we all knew that Sydney would at some stage need the sort of product of the Metro, and I might talk a little bit about those products, but tell a story about the whole rail network. And one of the things that was actually quite interesting at the time, there was a lot of passion about and love for our double-deck trains. And there were a range of reasons for that. They've got great amount of seating. Also, it's quite complex operations, and I describe the timetable and the train controllers as artists, in a dark art that not many people knew much about, but they actually did amazing things, and trains were going everywhere, and I think the operators on the day, doing in the environment they were in, were doing an amazing job to keep a very complex network going. What I would actually say is, it may be sacrilegious to say this, but I think we almost had a curse from Bradfield, and the curse was that when the network, his architecture was designed in the 1910 and delivered into the 1930s, there was so much capacity that the planning after that got lazy. It was an amazing strategy that Bradfield had. It was amazing delivery that was had for Sydney, but we had so much capacity that we just augment that over time and add trains in here and there. And the world had moved in that time. we had a different city. We didn't have steam trains coming in from the country, but we just continually added little bits and pieces until we had a network that was basically getting to the stage of being unmanageable. There are so many complex movements from trains, with freight trains, passenger trains that are really just going through the middle of the city, getting people on and off trains from north, south, east and west. And so what had happened is where other cities didn't have the capacity and might have built a new line, and in some cases that may have been a metro line, in Sydney we just kept adding in and in. And that network was breaking. It started breaking the first major timetable failure in the 1970s, a famous timetable called the Shirley timetable. Every 15 years we had a major timetable failure, and by the time of the opening of the airport line in 2000, where there's a lot of nervousness about Olympic timetables, there's a view that our network had been stretched as far. You had a foundation for a 3-story house and you'd build a high rise on top of it. And so the next solution was what was called the Christie Report, or not called, it was maybe called something else, but it was known as the Christie Report after Ron Christie. And he gave advice that the network was way too complex. And he presented some recommendations on how you could actually streamline the network by sectorising and trying to have trains stick to their tracks, not traverse across the whole network, and actually get a more consistent pattern, a more reliable form of operation. And he also identified that there was a need for some major cross CBD capacity now. The Bradfield solution had worked wonderfully for 70 years, amazing, but it had now, after 70 years, reached its end of its capacity. You needed a new augmentation of capacity. And there was a recognition that a Northwest Rail link for Sydney, when it was going into that complex network, it would drive a CBD crossing. So that was come out in the Christie Report. And basically the reality was that when you build a Northwest Rail link, which there was an expectation as governments do, you had to solve cross CBD north-south capacity by rail as well. The solution from Ron Christie was a thing called MREP, Metropolitan Rail Expansion Plan, which was a Northwest Rail link connecting to a CBD new heavy rail line, connecting to a Southwest Rail link. And that was a government policy position. I think that there were some views within government and some policy areas of government that if you're going to spend that much on new rail for Sydney, and that's what you need, is that the time to think about not actually augmenting the existing system, but actually building a completely new system? And that led to a proposal for Northwest Metro. That was cancelled and then scaled back to a CBD Metro, and then ultimately cancelled as well. And then here we are in 2011, new government wanting to build a Northwest Rail link as a political commitment and needed for that area of Sydney, but knowing that when you built that Northwest Rail link, you would need new capacity across the city. So that's all the context. The argument we put forward in Sydney's Rail Future is we shouldn't be having a fight about metro versus suburban rail. They are actually very good for different tasks. And I think we maybe in Sydney have been a bit blurred. On the one hand, trying to have this wonderful double-deck high-sitting railway, a perfect system for someone coming from Campbelltown to the city, where people get on to about 40 minutes from the city and it just comes and everyone gets off. That we had people advocating that's the perfect solution for Sydney, and then suddenly a metro from a system cancelled and a metro announced. And also, at the time, not telling us when that metro was announced, there was no story about what it meant for the double-deck network. So we need to bring the story together and actually say they're both amazingly good products. We should actually be very proud of our double-deck railway in Sydney. It does an amazing job. Yeah. But we do need the product that a metro is. And I think everyone listening to your podcast will know what a metro is, but I think it's a very standardised service, high capacity, usually to a single stopping pattern, focusing on the ease of boarding and alighting, getting on and off. And that's a system that's quite amenable to high capacity operations. You have the suburban rail, commuter rail. That's a system that in Sydney provides very high seating. It has a very different capacity algorithm. In a metro, you do one type of service, and as you know, tailor all your systems around high capacity, and that suits an area with high volume. The suburban is actually works well with the economic utilisation, where you may have not one service may not justify the expense of heavy rail, but when three lines merge into one of lower capacity, that's a very economic utilisation of rail as well. So what Sydney's Rail Future was saying is there's actually an amazing future for all of those, and it talked about 3 tiers of service. It talked about a metro product being needed. It talked about, and in particular, when we're going to have this new harbour crossing, for somewhere like the Sydney CBD with lots of people getting on and off trains, and it would be ideal that the metro service offering be the new crossing. It talked about the need for some of our out areas and our long distance trips, the need for augmenting suburban, and it also talked about the role of our longer distance commuter rail. When I say commuter rail, I don't mean overnight trains. I mean trains that might come from a Gosford or a Newcastle. In fact, the sort of places that you now are looking at high-speed rail to. So that was the argument of Sydney's Rail Future, is you actually need to respond to all 3. The view was that the Northwest Rail Link and CBD capacity must be considered together. That is going to be a major $20-30 billion initiative, and that is the time to introduce that new metro product to Sydney, and to have an integrated line, simple operating pattern, modern signalling systems, modern train control, automation that delivers that high capacity. The CBD is well suited to the metro product. There was a bit of controversy about the Northwest Rail Link as metro. I think you could make an argument that maybe it would be good for suburban, and there are people going 35k into the city. But on the other hand, I also think that the Northwest Rail Link is a place where people are getting on and off trains. It's not one of those. You've got a shopping centre at Rouse Hill. You've got shopping centres at Castle Hill, interchanges, Epping, through employment, about 6 employment centres. It's a place where people are getting on and off trains all the time, and it's a place where people are going to uni, to cinemas. It was a place that was well suited to a train that was with the metro offering of multiple doors. Less seating, a focus on flow as well. So the ultimate recommendation of Sydney's Rail Future was we would have a 5-stage program for the improvement of rail in Sydney, and stage 1 was actually just getting your basics right. We wanted to say that let's not all focus completely on capital. There's changes that you can make to your timetables to make them to improve sectorisation, to make services more standardised for the customer.
Let me just clarify something, Gary, before I lose the thread completely. I mean, you could probably talk about this for like 3 weeks and not just 1 hour.
Yeah.
But what I found during the time is not just you mentioned that there was a bit of a back and forth between something going out to the northwest and something being built in the CBD. So we had initially we had the Northwest Rail Link, then it became CBD Metro. I actually worked on the bid for that. I was in one of the 2 shortlisted parties, and it was absolutely heartbreaking when the new government pulled the plug literally a couple of weeks before the tender submission was due. But during CBD Metro, we were definitely talking about a metro. We were talking about a standalone system without connections to the existing Sydney Trains network. However, when I looked at Sydney's Rail Future, and I just did it again in preparation for this discussion today, I found you weren't talking about metro, you were talking about rapid transit. Now that could be semantics, but you also investigated different options, and it seems in Sydney's Rail Future that the preference was for rapid transit as a metro-like mode as part of the existing network. So that means with a connection in some shape or form, maybe line connection or so, to the Sydney Trains network. And that's definitely something that was abandoned again when the Northwest Rail Link actually became Sydney Metro Northwest. So there was a big debate around that, how people could dare to segregate Sydney Metro from the Sydney Trains network. It would be completely stupid. I disagree very much. I thought that was one of the
Yeah.
smartest decisions that was made in
Yeah.
Sydney. But I just wanted to check with you what the thinking was in Sydney's rail future to basically have a rapid transit mode as part of the existing network or as an extension of the existing network, and how it became a separated thing that was then called Sydney Metro.
Okay. Sydney Metro. Look, a couple of things. The word Sydney Metro was sensitive at that time because a Sydney Metro product had been cancelled twice.
Mm,
Um, what I'd say, there were actually three different pressures. There was the pressure for the new Metro product as a standalone new system, like you had at the CBD. There was the pressure for the augmentation of the double deck commuter rail suburban rail network.
mm,
There was also a pressure from some sources saying, and both from some operational people, but also from Treasury, and you can understand why. Well, rather than build a new metro with this high performance, you can augment your existing system, turn it from a suburban one, and retrofit it into a service that offers it might need new rolling stock, it might need new signalling, but just use all the old track. So we had all those three pressures happening at the same time. And I'm glad you remind me, because that was a driver. So there's three forces pushing against each other. One of the things that was very clear is there were a lot of pressures on the existing network, and there was a view. We actually looked at a solution of completely standalone, everything being a new asset. But we also looked at, if you're going to invest in this new metro/rapid transit product through the city, it must solve problems for the existing network. Now, obviously, taking customers off existing rail does help. Someone like Town Hall, that's obvious.
yeah.
But there was also enormous There was pressures on the southwest, growing, the increasing demand from Macarthur. There was pressure. The Bankstown line trains, they'd come towards the city and then they'd split and go in two different directions through the city, both the city outer and Sydney inner, city inner and city outer. So one of the approaches we recommended is the new metro/rapid transit solution must deal with some of the operational challenges that the suburban network is facing, so that the suburban network can actually deliver more trains. So what was proposed was a solution where you would actually bring the Bankstown line into the new metro, and I should say our thinking was always that it would be a conversion of the network. I think we probably underestimated some of the challenges of that conversion, but it was a conversion of the network into a metro-style product. We didn't envisage the same degree of asset change that ultimately was decided. Probably one where we were a bit cautious. We were probably is we actually recommended two sectors go into that. There was the Bankstown and the part of the Illawarra line as well. They would go into this new. So you'd actually have a branch. Now that was something that, and certainly there are plenty of metros, as you know, that do have branches, particularly far out on the system. But that for multiple, and part of the reason that was recommended was that we wanted this new CBD tunnel to actually reduce a lot of the pressures on the existing suburban network. So by taking the Bankstown line out, you actually took out one of the big complexities where trains bottleneck approaching the CBD, and that actually not only that taking 8 Bankstown trains out freed capacity for more trains from southwestern Sydney and from the growing inner west areas. The Illawarra was at that time our fastest growing network, so taking some pressure off that. They always envisaged that it would be a metro product with conversions of the line. There were two factors that over time, and I actually think if you look at Sydney's rail future today, and assuming the government is committed to the Bankstown conversion, I think we've pretty much done most of the strategy. Probably the most notable thing we haven't done is at the Illawarra, part of the Illawarra. It was never the Wollongong section, but the local part from Hurstville, the shorter distance, didn't go into this new metro. I think there were two separate drivers for that. The first one is I don't think, and a reflection from my role in Sydney's future, I don't think we fully thought through the freight implications well enough. That was something. I think we broke out freight as a separate part of the Transport for New South Wales, and I think some of our conversations probably didn't factor freight in effectively enough. And the second issue was our metro team and the Sydney Metro, as it established, very much felt that the success and high performance operation in this network was best addressed by not having branches. So both those factors were pressures that led to what you have today, which is a single Bankstown line conversion.
Hi, this is Doc Frank again. I hope you enjoyed this first part of my conversation with Gary McGregor. If you did, please share it with a friend and make sure that you subscribe and watch the upcoming parts 2 and 3, which will be episodes 96 and 97. Thank you for listening, and until next time.